Last night I gave a talk that I titled Why, just the word why. And I wanted to answer some of the big questions of life. Why are we here? Where are we going? Why is there death? Why is there illness? All those types of things. And of course, as in everything, you give a big talk like that and you ask a lot of questions, you generate a lot more questions. And specifically, someone asked me some questions that I thought were very thoughtful and worth taking to some time here to answer. So the first one was about soul contracts. Now, I'm very careful usually when I talk about this to use the word soul plans or soul agreements rather than soul contracts. And I believe that's the terminology I used last night, but they asked me about soul contracts. It's not my preferred word, and here's why. Because the word contract itself carries legal baggage. A contract requires specific elements: offer, acceptance, consideration, and then there are remedies when breached. And that framing turns our pre life agreements into something that's adversarial, like we're going to get sued by the universe if we veer off course. As I said, I prefer the term soul agreements because it's not a matter of a contract where there's going to be breaches or remedies if we breach the contract. It's more of a relationship between us and our higher self or our soul guides and maybe other parties that come in with us. But these are more of like loose frameworks than they are agreements with clauses and contracts or but these are more like loose frameworks than they are like a contract where there's going to be a breach clause, for example. The universe itself is not a cosmic courtroom. So, in my view of soul agreements or soul plans, there is no contract language. And I don't really think we need to worry about too much whether we're going to breach this contract because it's not between us and, say, a third party or even a higher party. Now, the second question this person asked me, I really is one that I always wrestle with, and I love the fact that this person raised it. And it's about the idea of, does everything here happen? Is it planned? If we have soul plans, then that implies that things might be predetermined, and that would take the novelty out of it and the challenge of being here. So the question basically this person asked me was, maybe sometimes we come in just to experience the uncontrollable, and that is the greater challenge, is experience something uncontrollable as opposed to something that we planned out. Now, the reason why this question to me is so fascinating is it sits right at the heart of one of the oldest philosophical debates in the universe, and that is whether the universe is deterministic or is a genuine randomness built in. So the old Newtonian model treated the universe like a billiard table. So if you know the position and the velocity of every ball and the friction on the table and everything else, all these other variables that we learn in physics, you can predict everything that follows. So if you set the ball in motion, if you set the universe in motion, you know that it's going to act in a certain way. And if you have enough information, you can actually predict that. Now, this works with the billiard table, but think about billions or trillions of variables and things in the universe interacting with each other, and it appears to be random. It becomes practically unpredictable because we don't have the information to predict it. Now, the question is, does that mean it's actually random, or does it just appear random? Does it just appear that way because we lack the ability, the tools, and the measurement to track everything? If we could measure everything, would it be deterministic? And as I think about this, I think about things like the weather. The weather at one time, I'm sure, seemed completely random. People wouldn't know what it's going to do next week or maybe even the next day. But now we can model the weather. We've got satellites, we've got weather balloons. We've got technology with these models that can model the weather, and we can model with pretty reasonable accuracy pretty far out. So the weather appears not to be random. And if you look at other things in the universe, maybe if we had more information, we could model it physically perfectly, and therefore the randomness would go away. So that does leave, though, human behavior, because human behavior is not a physical thing necessarily. It seems like internally we have thoughts, we have feelings, we make decisions based on that. Now, some people believe that we are purely biological robots, that we are fully determined even as human beings. And if you could predict a baby or have a baby and know its genetics and know everything that's going to happen to that baby, you could predict that baby's next sentence, for example, even as they grow up. If this is true, though, that means that free will is completely an illusion. And if free will is an illusion, then so is moral responsibility. Because how can you hold someone accountable for something that they had no choice in doing? My actions wouldn't be any more controllable by me than a billiard ball on a pool table. So if you follow this thread all the way through, the whole framework of growth, learning, and accountability actually collapses. If there's no free will, if there's no choice, then what are we even doing here? So this gets me to what I call my so what test. And this is the so what. Whether free will is ultimately real or not, we have to act as if it is. Even if soul agreements do exist, most of us have no memory of making them. So, from our human vantage point, from us being in this biological unit that we're in, life feels full of the unexpected and the uncontrollable. And navigating that uncertainty with wisdom and compassion, I think that's the real curriculum, regardless what was planned before we arrived. So, we can get ourselves all caught up in this axle about whether or not everything is planned or not, but again, from our perspective, inside this machine, inside this biological unit that we're in, inside the simulation, if we were going to call it that, from our perspective, we have to act as if it is real and as if there is free will and it's not predetermined. So, I actually think that soul agreements may operate at a different layer than physical determinism anyway, not really working around free will, but working through it. And here's the kind of hybrid model I've come up with. There's the one model that says everything is random and there's free will and there's no determinism whatsoever. There's no maybe order to the universe if you want to look at it that way. The other one says that everything is determined, even the actions that we human beings take. There's a movie called The Adjustment Bureau, which is based on a book by a guy named Philip K. Dick. And I think this captures this tension beautifully. If you haven't seen the movie, I suggest you see it. I recommend it to all of the clients that I work with. And this movie says that there's a plan, but free will continuously shapes and reshapes it. So as agents in the universe, as free will agents, we go around and we do our thing. But there's these other agents that work for the Adjustment Bureau, and they're constantly kind of adjusting the plan. And they're looking at the possibilities and they're looking at the probabilities based upon the actions that we take. And they make little tweaks to try to get us back on path. I think that's probably more like what soul planning works like than this deterministic universe that some people seem to think it means. So before I get to the third question that he asked, I actually want to pause on something that was said in the second question. And that was this idea of us as a soul coming here and part of our soul remaining on the other side. And that soul, that part of us that comes here, comes maybe to help other people. I think there's a larger and a wiser aspect of who we are that never fully incarnates. And that's what we refer to as our higher self. What comes into the body is more like an emissary or an agent, if you want to say, a portion of a much greater self. And that connection back to what remains on the other side is always available to us at some level, even when we can't feel it. So for me, that's not just a poetic idea. I think that's literally how this works. So this comes to the third question. Do we come here solely to help others learn and grow rather than focusing on our own development? Or do we come here for our own development or some sort of combination or what? I think this person's onto something that's very real. And I learned this concept from a series of books called The Team by a woman named Frances Key. And these books were channeled to her by her mother. And the reason why it's called The Team is because as individual as we feel like we are when we're in these bodies, we're really part of a team. We're part of a greater community where I think of it as we're part of a body. So if you think of cells in a body, for example, cells make up organs and organs make up systems and systems make up the body and the whole body works together. So when people say, am I here for myself or am I here for the greater good? I think the answer is yes. It's actually both. And I believe also souls or spirits come to this earth for different reasons. Some come to learn and grow through difficulty. And we can see examples of that as we look at people grow through very difficult things. But as my friend Kelvin Chin says, if you look around, it looks like not everybody is here to learn or even to grow. Some people seem to be kind of asleep. If you think of school as Earth as a school, they seem to be kind of sleeping through school. They may come simply to taste physical existence in a way that only a body can make possible. They might come to watch sunsets, to feel love, to experience something maybe even as simple as ice cream. Now, that's not to diminish the people that come here for that. That's a valid reason to come here, as valid as any other, I guess. It's not a lesser purpose; it's a different purpose. This physical world offers something that the other side apparently doesn't in the same way. And maybe some souls just want to experience that. They want to experience that contrast. So when I look around, and I think about people that are here and why they're here. I try to think maybe they're here for different reasons. And this what this person said to me also kind of touched on what the Buddhist tradition calls bodhisattvas. These are souls that have moved beyond needing earth as a personal classroom, and they arrive specifically to assist others in their growth. So there may be souls here with their higher soul back in the spirit world they're not here for their own personal development. They may be here to help us move forward as humanity, to help the whole body to become better or more realized. They come as guides, they come as catalysts. Sometimes they even come as the people who cause us the most pain because that's what we needed. So this is getting really, really deep down the rabbit hole. But as you know, I wanted to just kind of touch on that as maybe some explanations for why people are here. And I don't think there's really one simple answer. And when it comes to why we're here and our development, et cetera, I just want to say one more thing. We talk about souls as being advanced. We talk about souls as being masters. We talk about souls as being, not as advanced or baby souls, or I refer to them as maybe unskilled. But I want to keep in mind that this is all relative, and there can be what seems to be an infinite spectrum of development. We're all simultaneously beginners relative to souls that are further along, and we're also teachers or masters relative to the souls that are just starting out. So before we get too full of ourselves and thinking we're masters, keep in mind that there are probably almost an infinite number of souls who are, quote, farther ahead of you. And before you get too down on yourself for being a beginner or not being far enough along, think about the fact there's an almost infinite number of souls behind you. You're always kind of in the middle, I guess is the way I put it. So for me, humility seems like the right posture, no matter where it is you think that you stand. And also understanding that no matter where you are, that you're doing just fine, that you're where you need to be. And you don't have just this one small period of time to develop, whether you believe in reincarnation or not. This is just a small part of a bigger part of your life as an eternal soul. So these are great questions. I want to thank the person that sent them to me, and I'd love to hear back from you if you have any thoughts on these things.